everyone, and welcome to our returners session today, hosted live from Tangent HQ. I'm delighted you could all join us. We might just give it a few more minutes to see if we have any slight latecomers, but in the meantime, I might just tell you what lies ahead. So the first order of the day is a masterclass on the application of design thinking to your career by our esteemed academic contributor, Lucy McKenna. So she'll be chatting to you for 20 minutes, and we're delighted to have Lucy on board today. And she'll give you kind of practical insights and tips that you can apply when embarking upon a return to the workplace and what that might look like. After Lucy's session, we'll have a 20-minute breakout room workshop whereby you'll be able to apply some of the tips and tricks you've just learned from Lucy in real time and think about how they might work relative to your circumstances. And then we'll be finishing off the session with a 20-minute roundtable, during which Lucy will be sharing her professional and personal insights into the returner journey, and she will be joined by Bank of Ireland's head of HR, Una Kelly, and also a former student of ours, Claire Cullen, who has also embarked on a return to the workplace. So we'll just give it a few more minutes before we kick off, just to see if any more join.
Okay, so you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm like too busy looking at the settings to see all your lovely messages. Thank you. So yeah, as I say, I do those roles at varying levels of success depending who you ask and when you ask them. I'm also an entrepreneur. Back in 2016, I set up my own company, Fully On, as a learning design consultant. And I've just recently merged my company with another woman, Jess Hidden, and we are now the Brave Lab. And being self-employed and now coming into a new journey of partnering with someone and going forward is very exciting. What I do is I'm a facilitator, a learning designer, a coach, and a consultant, essentially help an organization identify and solve problems. I spend a lot of my time asking why and why not, and digging down to the issues at hand. I am also, this is a very nerdy word, a Zoogler, ex-Google, spent nearly 10 years working for Google in Dublin. But I could see the 10 years on the horizon, and for me, I knew I always wanted to do my own thing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to step out at this stage. I'm also my most recent role that of a mother. And I say most recent, it's actually 2 years now, but I still haven't got a clue what I'm doing. It feels new every day. And I think it's really interesting for someone who works in the area of creativity and innovation and doing things without fear. The best people that you can hang out with are little people, because they just don't care. They I remember when my niece actually was learning to crawl, she started to crawl backwards, right? She didn't care that she was doing it the wrong way. She just knew that she had to get from A to B. And it's such a journey then becoming a mother myself, and seeing that. And I've learned how to feel continuously through that journey. So it really is, I think, one of the most creative, innovative journeys that you can go on. The last few years, I've been working with Tangent across their programs. And I had the pleasure last year to do a module in their Creative Thinking, Innovation, Entrepreneurship course on career design. And that's what we're going to touch on today. We're just going to talk a little bit about that. But before I can talk to you about career design, I need to give you a bit of a run through, a very, very fast run through on design thinking. Okay, so I'm just going to throw up some slides. Now, bear with me. Honestly, 1.5 years of using Zoom, and I still to this day can't always figure it out. So just hopefully it will. Oh, everyone see it?
Perfectly, yeah.
Perfect. Yep. Okay, there we go. That's all my slides of what I just talked about. Okay, so let me talk to you about design thinking. Design thinking, it's something that I come across. I did a master's back in 2003, and I didn't come across design thinking, but I come across human-centered design, which is what design thinking is. It's a methodology used by designers to solve complex problems and to find desirable solutions for the users. So as I said, it's human-centered. It's a form of human-centered design. So it focuses on the user or the people that are experiencing the problem, and creating solutions that really work for them. So it's not like designing for beauty and making things like look pretty. It's about functionality and making sure that the solutions really help identify or help fix the problems for the user at the end of the day. I'm going to run through quickly the Stanford D School Design Thinking 5 steps. Okay. There are a few models out there. There's another one called the Double Diamond, but this is the one that I use all the time, and I find it the easiest way to explain it. I'm going to run through it very quickly, and I'm going to give you a little example of how it was used. Okay. So the first stage in the design thinking process is empathy. Okay. So this is where you learn as much as possible about the problem that you're trying to solve and those who experience that problem. All right. So you do this through observation, through interviewing, through research, through maybe trying to step into the shoes of the people who experience it and go through it yourself. Okay. So this is a big research piece around the problem and those who experience the problem. And the second stage then is define. And this is where you collect together all that data that you have come up with through your research in the empathy phase. And you really start to dig into what are the specific issues and what are the needs that the user has. All right. And you get everything out in front of you and you really try to identify the real issues. So, because sometimes the problem that you think you have is not exactly what you have, and you have to dig a little bit deeper. Okay. So you get everything out in front of you. And only then do you start to come up with ideas. Now, our tendency as human beings is when we have a problem is we straight away jump to solutions. Okay. But the more time you stay here in the kind of the depth of the problem, we're really getting to know it and understand those experiencing it, the better you will work when you get to coming up with ideas. This phase will go a lot easier and come up with a lot more fruitful ideas that can be tested. Once you've come up and you've brainstormed and come up with a number of different ideas, then you decide, okay, are there a few of these that I want to prototype, build a representation of? So if you're in the product space, you can build something physically. All right. In the service space, I'll show you a few examples later on. You can do storyboards that step out that process. All right. And then you test. You return to the people who experience the problem and you put it in front of them and you see, does it work? All right. And the most important part of this whole process is this. It is an iterative process. You do not do this once and then walk away and say, okay, that's done. All right. You might do empathy and define and get to ideate and realize, you know what, we don't have enough information to come up with great ideas. And you go back. All right. You could get to the test phase and you realize the prototypes that you created aren't addressing the problem. You may go back to ideate at this stage, or you might go back a little bit further, but it is a cyclical process. And even in business, whether it's products or services they're creating, or even processes, you can use design thinking on process as well. You can do this once, but you should, as a business, to remain competitive and sustainable, go back and do this over and over. Okay. Quick example of this in work. In Denmark, they have an assisted living program for elderly people. And as part of that program, they have a Meals on Wheels service. And they realized that the number of people that were using this Meals on Wheels service was continually falling. All right. Nutrition was an issue within this assisted living program. So they really wanted to tackle this because they knew this was a way that they could try and ensure that elderly people had decent nutrition. So they went to a design firm and said, look, can you design some new menus for us and make it more attractive and appealing? And they said, well, leave it with us. All right. And we'll figure out what the best solution is. And what they did is they went and they talked to the elderly people who had used the service and maybe had stopped using it. But they also talked to the people in the kitchen making the meals. And they talked to the people who drove the van to deliver the meals, right? They wanted to get a whole picture of this whole service that was delivered. And what they found out is that for elderly people, it was actually, they felt a little embarrassed to have to receive these meals. It also was, they had a lack of control. So these people have been cooking their meals all their lives, and now all of a sudden they don't have the same control over what they are eating. And they also found out that it reinforced the loneliness that they experienced, having, getting these meals and eating it by themselves. In addition to that, they learned that morale in the kitchen wasn't great. And while people knew they were doing a job and it was a good thing that they were doing, they didn't feel that they were fully valued, right? So there was a whole slew of problems when you really dug into it, all right? So what they did is they brought together in the ideate stage, they brought together people, some of the elderly people who work as, with support services for the elderly, people from the kitchen staff, the government, brought a group together, and they come up with a number of ideas. And what they finally ended up doing is they rolled out a new brand that is now called The Good Kitchen. Don't ask me to say it in Danish. So they rebranded it, made it a lot more modern. They brought in a professional chef to train those in the kitchen, got them new uniforms. They created a feedback loop between those receiving the meals and those cooking the meals, so that there was some sort of connection there. And they did create new menus, as well as modular packaging, so the people they didn't have to eat all the meal at once. They could actually add to it themselves and use the various pieces of it. Okay, so by going through this process, they really unearthed a lot deeper problems that they were able to tackle with their solutions. And this is why the design thinking process is great. You really tackle the issues at hand, and you focus on the user and what's really going to help them. So it puts the user at the center of the design process. It focuses on the problems and their needs. When it comes to ideation, there is no such thing as a bad idea, right? You have to put everything on the table to get to the great ideas. And this idea of failing fast and learning, failing is good. That's why we have that test and iterate approach. All right. So this is our quick run through the design thinking process. Before I move on, any questions on that? And you can throw it into chat, or you can come off mute. Make sense? Yeah. All right. So what if we were to take this approach in your career, all right, or your life? I kind of think it's very hard to delineate career and life separately, because particularly now they blend so much, all right? So what if you were to take this design thinking approach to your career? In the empathy phase, question: who is the user of your career or life? Put it in chat or come off mute. Who is the main user? Anybody?
Ourselves, me.
Yeah, yourself. Absolutely, right? We are the user of our life, our career. It can feel like others are part of it, but you are the main user. So in the empathy phase, it's about understanding yourself as much as possible. What are your needs? What is important to you? What are your likes and what are your dislikes? What is your skill set, right? What are your values? What engages you? What doesn't engage you? What is the actual dream when it comes to the type of work or life that you want for yourself, all right? And I often say none of this is rocket science, but it takes the time to sit down and to reflect on it and to think about it, all right? And once you have taken some time to do that, then you can really start to articulate what are the specific needs that you have when it comes to the type of career that you want, okay? And as I said, this can often mean getting stuff out of your head and in front of you, writing things down and putting it out there, all right? And only then should you jump into the ideas phase and start to come up with ideas for what it is, what type of career is actually going to work for you, or what type of job. For some people, I always ask people, well, what's the difference between a job and a career? And you know, some people would say, well, a job is you just go and do it, whereas a career is something a little bit more focused. Everyone has different ways of defining these things. But only when you've kind of reflected and taken some time to understand you and really identify your needs, that's when you can come up with the best ideas of the next steps. And then you go on to prototype. And prototyping in life design or career design is identifying small steps that you can take to ensure you make these needs. Testing things out. Is there a way you can dip your toe in and test things out without jumping in fully? And then another important piece that we often can be guilty of missing out, reflect, all right? Really reflect on that action that you took, on that experience that you had, and adapt as you need. And like before, it's an ongoing process. This is a reflective journey. It's something that you do on an ongoing basis. You tune into, you check in, see what's working, what's not, and adapt, okay? It's not just you do it once and that's it. All right. Any thoughts on this process? Love to see if it makes sense, or any questions.
It makes huge sense. Thank you. Rather than looking at a returner site where it's all about CVs and interview process, etc., it's actually getting to understand you. And if you, exactly as you put it so eloquently here, if you're able to define this for yourself, then at least you're going to be targeting career paths or jobs that are more appropriate, and you're not going to be knocked back and have your confidence further dashed. You're looking for something realistic rather than maybe a pipe dream or a stopgap, and then you get stuck in the stopgap. Yeah,
and actually the thing is as well, when you've spent this time considering these things and really reflecting it, when you're sitting in that interview, you can really talk to it because you've thought about this, and when you've really thought about what your interests are, and when you're talking about your interests, you're more passionate. You also have very good questions to ask them to understand, is this the type of role that's really going to work for me? So, you know, it can work, and so it gives you a good starting point, but it also gives you, as you say, that confidence when you step into that interview, that you can talk about all the things that you have spent time thinking about and trying to understand. Yeah. Brilliant. Mary, but it's the first step, creating the self-awareness. Yeah. And it's, you know, as I said, it's not rocket science, but we're busy. We have lives that just keep going, and it can be difficult to take the time out to do this stuff. Okay. So I'm going to do, Paul, yes, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I suppose, reflect on the fact that the design assumes that you're in the center of everything and in control of it yourself, but in a lot of cases you're not. You're having to battle things like ageism and sexism and what have you, and the final decision is outside of your ultimate control.
Yeah, and I think, well, I would actually say that design for me is actually about it's, for me, plan is very much, and I actually have a slide at the end of this, plan is very much, I want to go here and I want to do this. Design allows us to adapt based on those extra features and take them into consideration. And look, we have to deal with the reality. And sometimes people, you know, can only work 2 or 3 days a week, or we have a lot of factors that we have to take into consideration. I think, Paul, with that, and I mean, I have an experience, and we all have different experience, and we all have maybe different challenges that we have to tackle. But for me, that understanding, having your own voice, understanding you, gives you kind of the confidence to stand up and maybe tackle some of those. But the reality is, as you say, you know, there's going to be places out there that are just maybe going to be biased, and they're not going to be open to people. But then at the end of the day, you have to step back and go, well, that's their loss, because when it comes to innovation and creative thinking and a lot of this type of work, diversity is so important. And I see in the work that I do, organizations are beginning to recognize this, and you see a lot of initiatives around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would say, Paul, I suppose, like, ageism is one that you don't see coming up as much, but I can see that further down the line, it absolutely will be. Having people with that perspective is going to be so key for the success of organizations long term. And I think it's, this, I know through the creative thinking and innovation sort of work that you learn the language of how to actually talk to these things and why it's important that an organization should be hiring someone who is a bit older. And, it's getting the language to be able to talk to that as well. But yeah, the reality is you're going to have places out there that just aren't ready for it. And, sometimes we just have to step back and go, like, that's not for me and not for now. Any other thoughts or questions on that? Okay, so I'm going to do a quick little activity. Just to do a little bit on the empathy piece. So I want to take everyone to take a few minutes, okay? And I want you to think of someone who you admire or who inspires you, okay? I want you to think, why do I admire them, or what is it about them, okay? And then come up with 3 words to describe that person. Or if you have a couple of people in mind, that's okay, those people. But what I'm looking for is those 3 words. All right, so I'm just going to give you a few minutes. I'll go back. So, did everyone get yanked out of their rooms?
Yes.
Sorry. So,
I hope Howard doesn't think that I pulled the plug on our conversation.
No, it's Paul. I started out with Geraldine and I ended up with Claire. So
Yes, Paul.
all right, guys. So, how was that? Interesting conversation?
Yeah,
very good.
Okay.
it's just a bit of I missed the first half hour, so I had no idea what I was getting into. It was a bit mad, really. But I'd love to have been here from the start. I do apologize, I wasn't.
That's okay.
Will you be on again? Will you be doing
recorded,
it?
Laura? So,
Okay.
yeah. So, guys, we didn't do this before we got on. If you were looking at my slides, you've probably seen it. What do you think these words represent?
What do you think?
These words represent, these 3 words that you use to describe.
Oh, right. Okay. What?
Not at all,
in one
Laura.
word.
Sorry about that.
Positive traits.
Positive
Humanity.
traits. What was the other one, sorry?
Humanity.
Humanity, okay. So what do you think they are for you?
What do you
Values.
think?
And you can throw it into the chat as well, guys.
Sorry, I can't hear really very well.
So,
Sorry, what was the question?
sorry, I was just asking, what do you think these words represent, or what do they mean to you?
Yeah, okay, I answered that one.
Values.
Values, yeah.
Yeah.
So the things that you often admire in other people are things that are important to you, okay? Values that are core to you. And your values, they sit there underlying all the time. They influence your decisions, they influence your priorities and the actions that you take, okay? So when you're coming to look at career choices, tuning into what these are could be really important, all right? It can help you make decisions about the type of work that you might like to do, but also it helps you come up with good questions to identify, if I step into this role, will these values, will I be able to live these values? Okay, so for example, if you're someone who values structure and order, right? Will going into a startup work for you, where it can be often very chaotic? Now, it may, if you are the one or that they're bringing in to maybe create that order and structure, but if not, that could be quite challenging for you. Or if one of your values could be creativity, going into a role where you do the same thing over and over every day and your opinion isn't sought, then that could be very challenging as well. Now, it's not to say that you're going to have all your values, you're going to be able to live your values in the one job that you get. That may not necessarily, be achievable. But it's good to be able to identify if there is conflicts with your values in a particular role or project or something that you're doing. So tuning into this is quite important, all right? So this is just one of many ways you can do empathy. with yourself in this career design process. Other things that you can do that would be very useful, that will help you tune in, is reflecting, doing daily reflections. If you do journaling, understand what works for you, what type of work do you like, what do you enjoy doing, what do you not enjoy doing. Think about things like, what could I talk to someone for hours about? What am I really interested in and passionate about that I could just talk to someone for hours? Reflect on, what does work mean for you? It means different things for different people. For some people, it's just about getting money in so you can pay your bills. For other people, it really is a definition of themselves, okay? So really reflect on that. And again, the same goes for success. What does success mean for you? Success to someone could be to be able to spend as much time as possible with their family, with their friends, and therefore to work as little as they possibly can and just get as much money, right, as they need to be able to live. So really considering what success means to you. Reflect on things in your life to date. Where were the highs? And also ask someone who knew you as a child, if you have lucky to have someone in your life that did know you as a child, what were you really into? Those are the things that you're really natural and innate to you. Okay, guys, I'm aware that we're quickly running out of time. I'm just going to fly through the rest of this. When it comes to coming up with ideas, so again, as I said, the more time you spend here, the easier it is then to really come up with some creative ideas about what you want to do next. And when it comes to ideating, you can do brainstorming by yourself, but also you can ask other people to help you maybe come up with ideas, but make sure they are people that you trust and who have really your interests at heart. When it comes to ideation, try not to put any barriers in place. Let the ideas come, and then you can filter them out later, and don't judge them as bad ideas. Just put everything on the table, and allow yourself to visualize the dream. What does it look like? It's not to say that you will get the dream, but it's more to say there might be aspects of it that you're able to implement in your next step, in whatever that might be. When it comes to prototyping, I didn't mention this earlier. I would love to say that I come up with the whole concept of career design or life design. I did not. There are multiple people out there who've done it. There is one particular book, I don't know. Oh yeah, I actually have it here. Designing your life, or designing your work life, or designing your career. They've done 3 different versions. And this is by 2 Stanford professors called Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. And they talk about prototyping in your life. And they say that there's 2 types of ways you can prototype. So this is prototyping in the kind of product service world. So it's quite simple. You build a prototype of a toaster, you do storyboards. But when you're doing prototyping your career, prototyping conversations is one piece. So it's very much like, talk to someone, go out and talk to someone who's gone through this process, who's interested, who's gone on this journey before, and really understand the reality of it, what it looks like. And then prototyping experience. Is there a way for you to get experience without jumping full in? Can you do a short contract in something? Can you shadow someone? Can you do volunteering that will allow you to get insights to particular types of roles? Okay, so definitely have a look at that book. It's a really interesting read. So, and again, this goes back to the comments that was made earlier, this idea of why design. I prefer design over career or over plan, because this is what your plans are. We start here, we go there. This is the universe's plans for us, okay? It's just life gets in the way. There can be a lot of barriers along the way. And for me, design allows you to adapt, because you start with understanding who you are and what you're about. So as the world changes around you, going back to your point, Paul, and as things come your way, you've got the tools to help you navigate that journey, okay? And just, I've added 2020 in here at the end, but 2020 is, for us, the year the world changed. There's been such major shifts. The world of work has changed substantially in the last year and a half. The pandemic has really influenced the type of work that people are doing, how people are doing work, but also the murder of George Floyd, just this wave of protests and people finally standing up and going, we need more equity and diversity and inclusion in this world. And organizations are being put under pressure for this now. So there's a lot more movement here. And, you know, a lot of has been going on in the media about climate and how there's a lot happening here. And I don't mention these things to be scary, but it's more to show that things are shifting, and having that creative thinking, innovative approach is something that is needed for everyone as individuals, but also in the workplace. So like how we work is changing, the concept of work is changing. The pandemic really paused everything for a lot of people.
Sorry, Lucy, I don't mean to stop you mid-flow now, but I'm just conscious of time. Thank you so much. And I think it's just fantastic that you can speak so effusively to the topic. And I think you've provided plenty of food for thought, certainly to our attendees here today. So thank you for that. So now we're going to finish off the session with a quick discussion on the returner experience from a professional and personal perspective, what that means. And we're just going to discuss some items that actually, Lucy, you have touched upon just now. So that's super. Hopefully people have, you've gotten people thinking about what their returner journey might look like. So let me welcome once more Bank of Ireland's Head of HR, Una Kelly, who we are delighted to have with us today. Una can speak about the returner process and experience from a professional perspective in terms of smoothing that path to re-entry for employees in the bank, and equally from a personal experience. So she'll certainly add value here during our session. We're also delighted to have Claire Cullen with us, and Claire Cullen is actually a former student of ours who has only recently graduated from our Creative Thinking, Innovation and Entrepreneurship program, which is largely designed and tailored towards the needs of returners and bridging the gap between a career break and your next career step. So we're delighted to have Claire, and actually Claire is now an entrepreneur herself, having co-founded AJ Card Designs, so a real model student. And of course, Lucy, you will be joining us too. So just to kick off, I suppose, a key concern, shall we say, of returners is how to value the skills that they've gained during their career break, and really address it on their CV and even during interview. And kind of how to accentuate the positives there. So might we speak a little bit about that and how you would advise returners go about that? Lucy, I might put that question to yourself.
Okay. So again, that's one thing I'd say is like that reflection journey, that empathy piece. It allows you to really think about, well, what are the skill sets have I actually gained on this journey, and you know, write it into your CV. I did this. I took a year out, and I had the good fortune to have a bit of savings, bought a camper van. I traveled around Ireland, and I added it in my CV because it was a really important journey for me, because I didn't know what was going to be next. So I think taking that time to really reflect on what you have learned in your journey, and don't be afraid to put it into your CV. People will pull it out and they will ask you questions on it. And I had a lot of questions on that.
Super. And I know it's something we've spoken about before, Una, in terms of, you know, really making the most of those skills that you've acquired that you may not even realize are skills that can be used to your advantage and positioned favorably, you know, when it comes to employment. For example, you know, networking at the school gates, or perhaps leadership skills that you developed during volunteering, you know, positions. You might share your thoughts on that.
Absolutely, thanks, Hazel. So I think that very often when we're writing CVs, we're trying to fit something into a perception. So we're trying to write a CV for, you know, who we think is going to be reading it, rather than actually writing it about ourselves. So I think the first thing I would say is, you know, amplify your strengths, and talk about yourself in the first person, and don't worry about trying to fit yourself into some kind of corporate language to begin with. So so some of the skills, for example, that you might learn outside the workplace that are entirely relevant, and also actually thinking about future workplaces. You know, increasingly when we're hiring people, we're looking for people who are resilient, who are resourceful, who are creative thinkers, people who can look for solutions that are, you know, beyond the obvious. And so, you know, kind of amplifying those skills and talking about the resilience and the resourcefulness and, you know, the juggling, the, you know, things that you do outside of work that come very naturally and easily, where you have, you know, a massive to-do list that involves personal, business, banking, you know, all kinds of things that you juggle, and you do that very naturally, is really relevant in a workplace. And that ability, again, to kind of navigate between different kinds of tasks and do those effectively and hit deadlines, you know, to manage to remember all of the things that you do that you naturally kind of keep in mind. I know we were talking about this before, but things like, you know, when it comes to maybe children and, you know, caring responsibilities, like, does everyone have shoes that fit them? And, you know, the amount of retention, like the detail that you remember is phenomenal. So, you know, that ability to then take that skill that you have and apply it in a workplace, I think those are strengths that I would definitely encourage people to bring out as much as possible.
Excellent, excellent. And on that, I know you just mentioned resilience, you know, and the transition back to work may not be an easy one. You know, you may face rejections and setbacks, and it's about fostering your patience, being persistent, you know, and seeking support where you can. And Claire, you might speak a little bit about that in terms of, you know, I certainly know that the course you felt helpful in increasing that confidence and resilience. And you've mentioned to me before just the value of your networks and using your networks to increase your resilience. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it even goes back to that idea of trying to fit what we know into our CV, when increasingly we're finding jobs in other ways rather than just the traditional applying for a job through, in my day it used to be the newspaper, I think now it's online. But I think that even looking at your network, seeing what they're doing, because that's where you're spending your time when you're on your career break or when you're on your mat leave or whatever it is that you're out of work for. Look at where you're spending your time. You know, I increasingly spent time on my volunteer work with the pregnancy loss support charity. And when I was going back to work, I was looking for a way back, and there is no back, it's always forward. We're not going back anywhere. So we need to look forward and look at what we've gathered along the way and how we can apply that. In my opinion, you look at the people around you and see, well, these are the people that I'm choosing to spend time with now. What is it that they're doing that they can spend this time with me? And how do we work together in a way that works for all of us? I mean, we all need to work. That's just the nature of the capitalist society we find ourselves in. See, I think finding a way to apply your skills that will also generate you the income to do the things that you love. And as Lucy said, define success in your own way, you know, use your own metrics for the definition of success. For me, work includes, as you can see, there's no getting away from them. I have to be able to balance the family and the kids and the things that inspire me and that I'm passionate about, which meant kind of forging a new path for myself. But that's what I found great about the course, that it gave me the skills to forge that path. It gave me the knowledge and the insights and the network to build the connections and the infrastructure that I needed in my life to be able to create a job for myself that would balance all of the areas of my life in a way that I can make them work.
Fantastic. And I think it's such a useful course too, in that over 20 short weeks, you know, only 3 mornings a week, which, you know, can be slotted around your busy working from home life potentially, and done online. It's a nice, it bridges that gap, do you know what I mean, between, you know, your time away from the office and back to work by building on that resilience and making you aware of those opportunities and those skills that you may not even realize are just that. So that's wonderful. Thanks for that, Claire. Una, I know that for Bank of Ireland and certainly yourself personally, it's important for you and your employees to get clear on their values. You know, I know that Lucy spoke about visualizing the dream and what that might look like. And can you tell us a little bit about your ethos in terms of how returners might address that work-life balance and reshuffling priorities, if you like?
Absolutely. So I'm going to use my favorite line when it comes to this topic, which is ask for what you want, not what you think you can get. So we spend a lot of time actually thinking about ways that we can support people going on all kinds of leave, family, parenting, carers leave. So there's lots of different types of leave. Maternity leave tends to be the one that gets a lot of attention because it is the longest. And also in times gone by, organizations weren't necessarily always as supportive to our very valued maternity leavers as we might have been. And so in Bank of Ireland, one of the things that we do now is to create a maternity buddy for anyone going on maternity leave, so that they have a way of keeping in touch, etc. And also gives them the confidence and support to ask for the right things when they're considering their return. And that can also apply to people coming back from a career break of any sort, people coming back from a long leave. So, and by that, I mean, rather than kind of asking a question again, thinking about, I want a 4-day week, or I want to work flexibly, or I want to work 3 mornings a week, or whatever it is, but I'm not going to ask for that because I think I won't get it. So I'll ask for something that I don't quite want, but I'm just going to ask for what I think I can get. And actually what can happen is, because that isn't really what you wanted, the person receiving your request can sense that, but they don't quite know how to get to what it is that you are looking for. And then everybody can leave the conversation feeling like that was kind of a suboptimal conversation, like nobody really got what they wanted, and everyone's kind of scratching their head a little bit going, why does that conversation not go a little bit better? So I always encourage people to ask for what they want. And then it just becomes a conversation about, okay, well, what's the real need here? How can we support you with that? And also to recognize that needs. And I really liked the way that Lucy illustrated this earlier. So it's not just it's a path. It's very much like a game of snakes and ladders. Needs change over time. I think it's brilliant to be able to say, okay, so if you want to work 4 mornings a week now, that's great. When can we talk about this again? Do we talk about it again in 3 months or 6 months? How do we keep in touch with each other so that we're able to work very closely together as needs evolve and change over time? And I think that's a really good way as well for people to ask for what they really need, because then you're not asking for something forever and ever that's going to be somehow, carved in stone. You're saying, for the next 6 months, can I please try this? And here's how we can mutually kind of figure out if that's really working well for both of us and suiting all our needs. And then I think we've got a much better chance of helping people to get what they really want and to have their real needs met.
Excellent. And to allow people to prosper. Yeah, it's a dialogue. It's very much a dialogue. And perhaps it's something that returners don't feel entitled to, that conversation around needs, but certainly one that is valid. And it sounds like it, pays dividends then in terms of everyone's needs being met, do you know what I mean? And I imagine it helps with staff retention and all the rest too. Finally, we're going to look to the importance of setting aside time to build on your knowledge, whatever about the skills acquired during your career break. But I think the distance and, the perspective afforded by a career break can give people the opportunity to study, to learn, to, effectively hit refresh on their skills. Claire, you might speak a little bit about this in terms of your own learning journey with us here at Tangent.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was returning to work after a career break, and I went from working in financial services to working in a not-for-profit. And I loved the not-for-profit, and I loved the industry, but as anyone who's ever done it knows, it's 7 days a week. It's not a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So after my most recent maternity leave, I looked for a part-time job in adult education because I felt like I could work my own hours a little bit and it was a bit more flexible. So while I was in that industry that I started to see, I was in a private training company, and I was seeing the requests that were coming in from different employers all around Ireland and what they were looking for, the skills that they wanted their employees to upskill in were things like creative thinking, how to be an entrepreneur at work or in employment, and how to innovate, pivot, resilience, all those different kinds of skills that every employee needs, no matter what industry, really. So that's why I was drawn to the course when I first saw it advertised. And even the way I saw it advertised, it was on Instagram. I didn't see it through the normal channels. So I think being open to seeing something that will spark your interest, don't underestimate yourself. We can be realistic about what we're able for, be realistic about what we want. But I think often what we think is realism is actually underselling ourselves. I think a lot of the time, we're saying, well, I have to be realistic about what I'm capable of, but you're not being realistic. You're actually really undervaluing yourself. And I'm speaking from a personal point of view here, hugely kind of not unmotivated wouldn't be the right word, but deflated slightly coming back from maternity leaves when you've seen the the skills kind of drop back a little bit and you're a little bit rusty, and particularly in some of the areas that I've worked in where things move very quickly and you have to catch back up again after every little break. But what I found was doing this course gave me a huge amount of confidence, because I found how to, not just the skills themselves, how to keep the skills going, how to keep the knowledge going, where to look to keep myself fresh and sharp, what to be doing in order to upskill, if that makes sense. So, for example, one of the projects that we had to do was a real life project with a company, an actual company that was coming in. We had to report to them and we had to deliver a project to this real life entrepreneur who we'd never met before. I mean, talk about being thrown in at the deep end. But figuring out how to do that, how to research this company, how to research the space that they were in, and how to present that project to them, and then say, this is something that you can really do and this is what you should be doing. It was a baptism of fire, but it was amazing. It was amazing to come away from that with this huge report that we were able to create based on real tangible research that we had done that was genuinely going to benefit this company. And no matter where you work or what you do, that will stand to you in any industry. So I found that was one of the main sort of gains for me from the course, was that I was able to come out of it thinking not just that I had upskilled myself, but I also had the skills and the knowledge to continue to do that in future without having to constantly go back on refresher courses, but had my eyes opened to the resources and the networks that are already out there that you can use all the time.
Superb. And I know that, you know, for many, they may not have considered postgraduate study. There are various barriers to entry, whether that's juggling, you know, the work-life balance or funding potentially. Just to note that this course is Springboard funded. And as I said, it's 3 mornings a week for 20 weeks. The closing date for the next intake is Monday, the 23rd of August. So people still have a few weeks to gather the documentation required to apply. And really it just primes participants for career satisfaction and success. So you can align your values and, you know, your personal life with your working world. And it's really aimed at those who want to be job shapers rather than seekers. And I know that's true in Claire's instance. She's gone on to secure funding for a business idea that was quite nascent, I think, Claire, and has since gone on to prosper. So, you know, the success stories speak for themselves in Claire today. And it really, the course equips individuals with, you know, that creative confidence and skills to translate ideas that you might have into innovative solutions. Or at the very least, I think come interview stage, it just showcases that initiative to potential employers that you've been willing to go back and increase your skills base. So it's a super opportunity, and I would encourage you, all of you, to check it out. I think my colleague has shared a link there to the website. So yeah, we're not often associated with short programs here at Trinity, but you know, ultimately it is a qualification from Ireland's oldest university and Ireland's most successful university for generating student entrepreneurs. So I do hope that you've all enjoyed today's session. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, please do keep in touch. And if you did enjoy today's event, keep an eye on our social channels, because we'll frequently have masterclasses similar to this where we give hands-on tips and tricks for various stages of your career. So just to thank you all for attending, and also to thank Lucy, Claire and Una for their contributions today. I think they were superb. So thank you, everyone.